Welcome to Discovering the Northwoods from the Manitowish Waters Historical Society. We will take you on a journey through our local history with the help of primary source documentation. To learn more about this rich history or about the Historical Society, check out our website at mwhistory.org. There you will find blog posts, show notes, our YouTube channel, and a full transcription of this episode, including maps and photographs. James Duane Doty was the secretary attached to the 1820 Lewis Cass expedition exploring the western portions of the Michigan Territory. Territorial Governor Cass had many objectives on his 1820 expedition, including delivering some of the earliest Northwoods reconnaissance. Specifically, Doty references the rough map and provides a narrative of the portage and water routes in the Northwoods. The accuracy of the map and narrative are limited and should only be considered a baseline for the poor early government knowledge of the Northwoods. Interestingly, water course errors by Cass and Doty in the 1820s foreshadowed survey difficulties 20 years later, when Thomas Jefferson Cram was tasked with the establishment of the Wisconsin-Michigan border. Turns out, in 1840, the U.S. government believed the Montreal River connected to Lac Vieux Desert, creating a survey dispute that will ultimately be settled by the U.S. Supreme Court in the 1920s. As with many historical works from this era, there are phrases, terms, and descriptions that are inappropriate to our modern sensibilities. The Manitowish Waters Historical Society in no way condones these offensive remarks or passages. For this episode, we choose to read this publication from the 1820s in its entirety for educational purposes and accurate historical context. It is important to note that Doty's limited knowledge of the Northwoods is highlighted by the numerous inaccuracies in locations and names. Northern Wisconsin in 1820 by Honorable James Duane Doty. Detroit, September 27th, 1820. To His Excellency, Lewis Cass. Sir, the following information received at Sandy Lake during your absence to Red Cedar Lake, in answer to your interrogatories, I have the honor of communicating to your Excellency. It was obtained from persons who have traveled over and resided in the country, almost from their infancy. No opportunity was afforded of obtaining it from better or more enlightened sources than those improved, and I think in general it may be relied upon as correct. There are 3 chief places of residence of Indians in this country. The first and principal is Leech Lake, the next Sandy Lake, and the third Fond du Lac of Lake Superior. At Leech Lake, there are more than 200 men, at least 350 women married to them, and about 1,100 boys and girls. Their hunting ground is around the lake and extends north to Round Lake, west to Red River, south to the Sioux, and east until they meet the Indians of Sandy Lake. Their game is deer, bear, beaver, otter, muskrats, marten, fisher, raccoon, and a few red and gray foxes. The only buffalo they kill is on the border of the Sioux country. The beaver is hunted particularly on the River St. Peters, its tributaries. A few are found in other parts. Most of the small rivers abound in otter. The other game is found throughout their country. None of their western waters are as abundant in whitefish as Leech Lake. There are great numbers in Lake Winnipeg, Red Cedar, and Cross Lakes, but the rivers are destitute of them. They are fine-flavored and more delicious than those of the Sioux of Ste. Marie. There are various other fish in these and other lakes and rivers, as pike, carp, black bass, catfish, etc. A fish called by the Indians tunabe, and by the French tulabes, not equal to but greatly resembling the whitefish, is found in the large lakes above mentioned, and particularly in abundance in Leech Lake. The fish and the wildlife are the chief sustenance of the traders, and without them, the trade would scarcely be carried on. The tullibees are taken in nets of from 60 to 100 fathoms long. Late in autumn, and to preserve them are hung by the tails in the air until frozen. From July until November, the whitefish are taken, and the tullibees from the 1st of September to the later part of November, at the setting in of the ice, and both on the same ground. Neither are taken in the winter, but from the 20th of May to the 20th of June, immense numbers of tullibees are caught. During the winter, pike and pickerel may be obtained. The waterfowl throughout the northwestern country are nearly all the same. They are the bustard wild goose, several kinds of ducks, as the black French, nearly resembling the tame wood duck, swan, pelican, loon, and the gull. A fowl called the cormorant is found here. It lives on fish, is nearly the size of a raven, and of the same color. Has a leg like a loon, a bill about 4 inches long shaped like a snipe's, except at the beak, which is rather crooked and sharp like an eagle's. It alights in the water and on trees, and, it is said, roosts by suspending itself by the bill from a limb of a tree. The birds are nearly the same as those commonly found in the eastern states. The moose, elk, rain, and common deer, wolf, not north of Sandy Lake, red and white ermine, wolverine, lynx, skunk, porcupine, woodchuck, and red-striped squirrels are found in different parts of the country. There are many turtles of various sizes. Some very large and delicious are found in the lakes. No rattle or other snakes except a small striped or garter snake. The Indians of Leech Lake are in bands, and each band has its own chief. No general leader of the whole is acknowledged. The Brachu who resides at Sandy Lake has, when he is present, some considerable influence over them. The chieftainship descends from father to son, and the line becomes extinct by the death of the last male, the females being entirely excluded. In filling vacancies, they generally elect the tribe of the most valiant, brave, and powerful, or the man they deem the wisest or the most eloquent speaker. And this last qualification is considered highly essential and is generally preferred. And the person elected becomes the heir to all the honors of the old line. In fact, they always claim this right of election, but it is occasionally dispensed with when some daring bloody fellow, usurping the throne, holds either by his ferocity or his many and influential relations his tribe in awe. Such a one, however, is soon casually disposed of, if he does not in short time integrate himself by some extraordinary act with the band. Even then he can scarcely be considered secure, for he is only respected, not loved, and it is liable to be deposed at any time. Aware of this, he generally moves cautiously and deals severely. The chief of the Leech Lake Indians is Eski Bukios, or Flat Mouth. The regular chief of those at Sandy Lake is Brakasi, or Broken Arm, in Indian, Buk U Sangigan. And the chief of Fond du Lac, Gingwa Bai, or as called by the French, the Deaf Man. These are severely influenced by the Brachu, who it seems raised himself to this superior station merely by his eloquence. His ancestors have always been of good standing, and for a time furnished chiefs for the tribe at Sandy Lake. It appears he is the first emperor of these tribes, they having been entirely distinct and independent previous to his time. The Sandy Lake tribe of Indians is the second in size. It has 85 men, 243 women and children, besides 35 half-breeds. They are divided into 3 parties. One resides about halfway from Sandy Lake to Leech Lake, at a place called Pakwa-Gama, on a small lake through which the Mississippi runs, and near the boundary between these and the Leech Lake Indians. These Indians hunt north to Vermilion Lake, the headwaters of Fond du Lac River, and on which the Northwest Company has an establishment, west to Pacquaguana, as above mentioned, east to Fond du Lac River, and down it to the Portage de la Prairie, and south to the borders of the Sioux country and near Elk River, which falls into the Mississippi. It is about 100 miles to Pacquaguana, the same as Vermilion Lake, 50 miles to Portage de la Prairie, and 120 miles to Elk River. These are considered direct courses. Their furs and game are the same as those of the Leech Lake Indians. The birds do not vary from those in the country around Leech Lake. Whitefish and telebes are found in Sandy Lake, but inferior in quality to those of Leech Lake. The latter part of September, the whitefish begin to run, and continue until winter sets in. The telebes are taken at the same time as those in Leech Lake. Winter commences about the 1st of December and breaks up by the 1st of April. It is nearly the same as at Montreal. This applies also to Leech Lake, but it is much colder at Fond du Lac, where the season is generally 15 days later. The depth of the snow is not as great at Leech Lake as at Sandy Lake. Around Lake Superior, it falls 2.5 to 3 feet deep, but decreases to the west, so that when the snow is 3 feet in depth at Fond du Lac, the ground is scarcely covered at Sandy Lake. A south wind may prevail at Fond du Lac 3 days without decreasing the snow, while at Sandy Lake, one of 12 hours invariably produces a thaw. The summer is generally warmer and pleasant. Vegetation springs up and advances rapidly as the snow has disappeared. Potatoes grow finely at Sandy Lake, and most of garden vegetables may be raised. The food of the Indians in this country varies according to the different seasons. They occasionally subsist on the wabasipin. It resembles a potato, is mealy when boiled, and grows only in wet clay ground about 1.5 feet deep. The crane potato is another article of food, called by them the stitchock wabasipin. It is of the same kind, but inferior in quality to the wabasipin, and is found throughout this country. The watapini is a small root frequently pulled 3 feet long and is dried in order to preserve it. This root is found on the southern shore of Lake Superior, but is seldom brought as far as Sandy Lake. These 3 are boiled when prepared for food. They also use the bois rotor, or twisted wood, in cases of extreme necessity. It resembles the bittersweet runs into the tops of the highest trees, and from one tree to another has thick bark. It is sweet and palatable when boiled. To these may be added the wild rice, vol au vent, and such game as they occasionally kill, eating every kind and every part. I saw them yesterday cooking a skunk, but when it was prepared for the table, it was impossible to approach the lodge except to the windward. They boil the excrement of the rabbit with their rice to season it, and esteem it a luxury. To make that dish still more palatable, and one of the highest Epicurean dishes, they occasionally take a partridge, pick off the feathers, and without further dressing except pounding it to the consistency of jelly, throw it into the rice and boil it in that condition. In this they seem not far above the brute creation. It is scarcely possible to account for such an appetite or relish, except it be necessity having compelled them frequently to resort this loathsome food for sustenance. They have at length acquired a preference for it. A band of the Sandy Lake tribe of Indians resides at Paquamenaminikan, or Rice Lake, between 20 and 25 miles south of Sandy Lake. There are only 13 grown men in the village. Their number of young men, women, and children is 47. They hunt in the woods adjoining the lake. To the east of their village and near Fond du Lac, they occasionally kill a few moose. This band has never been much noticed by the English government and has been generally well disposed to ours. All of the men at Sandy Lake and south of it annually in the month of March go to the borders of the Sioux country, and as far beyond as their fear will permit them to hunt beaver, which hunt is called to them Notah-Miqua and signifies searching for beaver, Mick meaning beaver. Their families being left at home in this hunt repair to the sugar camps and are engaged in manufacturing sugar during the absence of the men, of which they make very large quantities. The Indians of Sandy Lake in the month of September repair to Rice Lake to gather their rice. In no other place does it grow in as large quantities as there. This lake is about 5 miles long and 3 broad. It might perhaps be called a marae, for the water is not over 5 feet deep, and its surface is almost entirely covered with rice. It is only in morasses or muddy bottoms that the grain is found. It was formerly the practice of the Indians, when the grain was in the milk, to pass around the canoes and gather up the tops in large shocks or branches and fasten them. By this means they obtained it also in much large quantities than at present. This work of harvesting is performed by the females. It is now gathered by 2 of them, passing around in a canoe, one sitting in the stern and pushing it along, while the other with her back to the bow, and with 2 small pointed sticks about 3 feet long, one in each hand, collects it in by running one of the sticks into the rice and bending it over the edge of the canoe, while the other she strikes the head suddenly and rattles the grain into it. This she does on both sides of the canoe alternatingly, and while the canoe is moving. About a gill is generally struck off at the blow. It is not ripe when harvested. It falls covered with the husk and has a beard about 2 inches long. One method of curing the rice, and that which makes it most palatable, is by putting it in a kettle in small quantities and hanging it over a fire until it becomes parched. The round roll is dug in the ground about 1.5 feet deep and 3 in circumference, into which a moose skin is usually put. Into this hole the grain is then poured, where it is trod by an Indian until completely hulled. This is very laborious work, and always devolves upon the men. After being sufficiently trod, it is taken out and cleaned, in a fan made of birch bark, shaped something like those used by farmers. This is the most expeditious method of curing it. The other method differs from only in drying. It is as follows. A scaffold is made a small pole about 3 feet from the ground and covered in cedar slabs. On this, the rice is spread, and under the scaffold a small, slow fire kindled, which is kept up until the grain becomes entirely dry. It takes nearly a day to dry one of the scaffolds full. The grain cured in this way is more nutritious and keeps much longer than the other. By the parched in the kettle, the substance appears to be destroyed. The rice, when cured, is put into sacks of about a bushel. A sack is valued at 2 skins. A fathom of straw or blanket will buy 2 sacks. A skin is valued at $2. One family ordinarily makes about 5 sacks, though those who are industrious sometimes make 25. The last, however, is very rare. A few provident Indians save a little for the spring of the year to eat with their sugar. Though generally by that time they have done curing it, the whole is disposed of for trinkets and ornaments. Thus, by gratifying their vanity, they are left nearly destitute of provisions for the winter, choosing to endure hunger and the greatest misery than mortify their pride. Welcome to Discovering the Northwoods from the Manitowish Waters Historical Society. We will take you on a journey through our local history with the help of primary source documentation. To learn more about this rich history or about the Historical Society, check out our website at mwhistory.org. There you will find blog posts, show notes, our YouTube channel, and a full transcription of this episode, including maps and photographs. James Duane Doty was the secretary attached to the 1820 Lewis Cass expedition exploring the western portions of the Michigan Territory. Territorial Governor Cass had many objectives on his 1820 expedition, including delivering some of the earliest Northwoods reconnaissance. Specifically, Doty references the rough map and provides a narrative of the portage and water routes in the Northwoods. The accuracy of the map and narrative are limited and should only be considered a baseline for the poor early government knowledge of the Northwoods. Interestingly, water course errors by Cass and Doty in the 1820s foreshadowed survey difficulties 20 years later, when Thomas Jefferson Cram was tasked with the establishment of the Wisconsin-Michigan border. Turns out, in 1840, the U.S. government believed the Montreal River connected to Lac Vieux Desert, creating a survey dispute that will ultimately be settled by the U.S. Supreme Court in the 1920s. As with many historical works from this era, there are phrases, terms, and descriptions that are inappropriate to our modern sensibilities. The Manitowish Waters Historical Society in no way condones these offensive remarks or passages. For this episode, we choose to read this publication from the 1820s in its entirety for educational purposes and accurate historical context. It is important to note that Doty's limited knowledge of the Northwoods is highlighted by the numerous inaccuracies in locations and names. The James Duane Doty Journals, Part 2. The Fond du Lac Indians are divided into bands and have no fixed place of residence, wandering around the rivers and lakes. Their time is occupied alternating in hunting and fishing, their country being poorer than that of either of the before-mentioned tribes. They hunt west to Sandy Lake Indians, north to the sources of Snake Lake, which empties into the Fond du Lac River 18 miles above the mouth of the Savannah, northwest to Encampment Island in Lake Superior, 36 miles above Fond du Lac, and the southern shore of the lake to the River Brule, and south to Pine Lake. The northern boundary of Faux-le-Vent Indians, and about 100 miles from their establishment of Fond du Lac. Their principal game is moose, bear, marten, mink, muskrat, case cat, lynx, hedgehog, of which they have great numbers, otter, a few beaver. They have neither the buffalo, deer, wolf, raccoon, fox, or wolverine. The tribe consists of 45 men, 60 women, and 240 children. There are about 30 half-breeds and 3 freemen who have families. The freemen are Canadians married to squaws living entirely with the Indians and are not engaged in the Southwestern Company, by whom, as well as the Indians, they are considered a great nuisance, being forever exciting broils and disturbances. There is an old black man in the employ of the company who has a squaw for a wife and a family of 4 children residing in Fond du Lac. These Indians have no degree in spirit or genius of those of the upper country, by whom they are considered very stupid and dull, being a little given to war. They consider the Sioux their enemies, but make few war excursions. They sometimes join those in other tribes, but have never taken that deep interest in the struggle that others have. In their manner and customs, they resemble the Indians of Sandy Lake, but are in no respect their equal, particularly in those which may be supposed to ameliorate their condition in life. There are 2 grand water connections in this country, one by Lake Superior and the Fond du Lac River, and the other by the Mississippi. The first is considered the most eligible route. It is about 1,300 miles from St. Louis to Sandy Lake, and 1,050 miles from Detroit by water to the same place. There are many rapids in the Mississippi, particularly above the Falls of St. Anthony, which it is almost impossible to ascend with boats or canoes. The waters of the river are also considered unhealthy. On the other course, the greatest difficulties are found in the rapids of the Fond du Lac River. But as this river is ascended by only 150 miles, the rapidity of the Mississippi continues for 600, and a strong current the residue. The difference in the exertion and fatigue between the two routes is very great. Lake Superior is computed by the voyagers to be 484 miles long. It is 300 miles from Detroit to Mackinac, and 40 from there to the mouth of the River St. Mary. That river is 40 miles long. Communication may be had with the Mississippi from Lake Superior by the Ontonagon, Iron, Cart, Presque Isle, Black, Montreal, Nauvoo, Brule, and Fond du Lac River. The Ontonagon is ascended 36 miles where the portage commences of 200 pauses, to the old plantation as commonly called, but by the French Vieux Desert, or Old Deserted Place, which is on the small lake of the same name, about 4 miles long and 3 broad. 2 rivers rise in this lake, one of the Menominee, which empties into Green Bay. The other discharges into the Salter River. They are both navigable for canoes. Iron River is so rapid that a portage is commenced at its mouth. The canoe is scarcely put into the waters the whole length of the river. 3 miles above the mouth of Carp River is a perpendicular fall about 45 feet. When it passes Porcupine Mountain, above the stream is small and with difficulty ascended. Presque Isle River has many rapids and is seldom used. Black River is the same. The Montreal River is not navigable, but at its mouth on the east side, a portage is made of 120 pauses to the small lake, in which distance the Montreal River is crossed twice, the first time at 11 pauses, and the second at 80. The lake is 3 miles long and is the head of another branch of the Salter or Chippewa River. This fork runs 15 miles into Turtle Lake, which is about 2 miles over. Thence it runs a few leagues into a small lake, passing through which it continues on until it joins the fork from Old Plantation Lake, 33 miles from Turtle Lake. A lake of considerable size is connected with Turtle Lake on the northeast by a river. In Lac du Flambeau, the Southwest Company, in another establishment of 5 traders and 20 hands, the return from which lasts seasons of 50 packs. In Lac du Flambeau, the Southwest Company has an establishment of 5 traders and 20 hands, the return from which lasts season about 50 packs. It lies from Turtle Lake near southeast. The route is from the mouth of the Montreal to Turtle Lake, from which there is a portage 1/4 of a mile to a small pond. Thence the outlet of the small lake 1/4 of a mile, from which a portage of 3 miles is made to the Old Plantation River. This is descended 18 miles to the entrance of the Riviera de Flambeau, which rises in the lake of the same name and is 24 miles long. The company's fort stands on the north side of the lake. The lake is crooked and 4 miles long and 1 broad. From this, there is a chain of lakes which extend down to the headwaters of the Wisconsin. Portages are made from one to another so as to connect the communication in that direction. The small river formed by the junction of the Turtle and the Old Plantation Rivers is almost entirely a rapid, and running over the beds of rock is very dangerous. It takes 7 days to descend it, and is 175 miles long. The River Salteur, Chippewa, is also rapid and very wide, and about 180 miles long, emptying into River Pepin. It is 63 miles from the Ontonagon to the Montreal River. Mauvais River, or Bad River, is ascended about 100 miles. A portage is then made of 22 pauses to the small lake, which is connected with another by a stream 1/4 of a mile long. From this, a portage of one pause to a lake and another pause to another lake, which last is connected to a third by a small strait, perhaps 30 rods long of a portage. One pause is made to Clam Lake, in which a branch of the Salteur rises. This lake is 1 mile long and 3/4 a mile broad, which is the general extent of all the lakes on this route. It is from this 6 miles to Spear Lake, 15 miles to Summer Lake, and 20 miles to a lake called the Indians' Poquahana. This branch continues through this lake and passes out on the southeast side. On the west, a small river enters, which is ascended 15 miles, whence a portage is made 10 pauses into Lake Coudray, on which the Southwest Company has an establishment. It is 9 miles long and 3 broad, and is connected with the Salteur by a stream 30 miles long from which it issues from it. The Mauvais is 12 miles from the Montreal River. The River Brule is 78 miles from the Mauvais and is ascended 90 miles to a bend from which a portage of 2 miles is made to Lake St. Croix, the headwater of the river of the same name. It is 3 miles long and 2 broad. On the River St. Croix, 100 miles from the lake, the Southwest Company has an establishment. It discharges into the Mississippi 300 miles from that trading post. Between the Mauvais and Brule rivers, several small streams empty into Lake Superior, as the Raspberry, Sandy, Susquehanna, Cranberry, Bulrush, and Little Iron rivers. Goddard's River is between Brule and Fond du Lac. As Fond du Lac River is ascended by you, it will be unnecessary to describe it. It will merely state that it rises in Vermilion Lake, is near 300 miles long, and that its general course is east. It may scarcely be called navigable above the Savannah, which enters 136 miles from its mouth. The Savannah is 24 miles long and ascended to its source. The portage to the small river empties into Sandy Lake is 6 miles. The river is descended 12. Sandy Lake is 4 miles long and 2 wide. By the outlet of the lake to the Mississippi is 2 miles. It is hardly the half of a mile. It is 250 miles from Sandy Lake to Vermilion by the way of the Mississippi and Trout Lake. The accompanying map was drawn by the person who communicated the preceding facts, and may, in some degree, convey an idea of the principal watercourses of the country. About halfway from Sandy Lake to Red Cedar Lake below, a river empties into the Mississippi, which rises in Duck Lake. A portage of 6 miles is made from the Mississippi, opposite Sandy Lake, to this river, which is ascended 60 miles. From Duck Lake, the communication with Leech Lake is over a country, 1/2 of which is covered with lakes. The land is generally heavily timbered. Trade. A skin is estimated at $2. A 2.5 point blanket is sold for 4 skins. 1 fathom of strode is the same. Half a pint of powder, 1 skin. 30 balls, the same. 5 branches of wampum, or 250 grand, 1 skin. A Northwest cast gun, 10 skins. 1 beaver trap, 4 skins. A large scalping knife, half a skin. Twist tobacco, 2 skins per fathom. 3 plugs of a skin, and 4 skins per carat. A mesh or 40 branches of white bead, 1 skin. A pair of leggings with ribbons and beads to garnish, 2 skins. 1 half axe, 1 skin. 1 hatchet, 1 skin. These are the principal articles of trade. Divers other things are given as presents. If an Indian obtains a credit for his supplies for the season, he must be furnished with a flint, a needle, an awl, a gunworm, and a little vermilion, rings, beads, and 3 or 4 inches of tobacco, besides various other articles, for which the trader charges nothing. In a credit of 600 skins, if a trader gets 300 in return for his goods, he considers himself recompensed. He frequently does not obtain even this portion. The articles received from the Indians are sugar, rice, and skins. A macaque of sugar weighing about 40 pounds is received for 4 skins. A sack of rice, 2 skins. A larger prime beaver, 2 skins. A large prime otter, 2 skins. 3 martens, 1 skin. 3 minks, 1 skin. 10 muskrats, 1 skin. A prime bear, 2 skins, 2 prime buckskins, 1 skin, 3 raccoons, 1, 2 lynx, 1, 2 fishers, 1. An axe is so essential an article with an Indian that he is generally punctual in paying for it, and on returning from his hunt he lays out a certain number of skins in payment for his axe, and calls the trader to notice it. The Southwest Company have a chief trade of this country, but they sustain a considerable injury from the small traders. They sent the Leech Lake last year 38 packs, from Sandy Lake 25, and Fond du Lac 9. This year, from the first place 53, the second 35, and the third 15. Last year, the whole return was not as much as usual. This year, rather more. The dogs used for drawing this country are of middle size and mixture of every breed. Their harness is made of something like a common dray harness, being composed of collar with tugs, a belly band, 2 back bands, and 1 across the shoulders and another the hips. 3 horse bells on the second band, it seems, are indispensable. They have no lines or breeching. Thus harnessed, the dogs are hitched to a train made of white oak slab, dressed down smooth, about 6 feet long and 14 inches wide, and turned up before the shape of the sleigh runner. On the crust of the ice, the dog will travel with 200 pounds on his train from morning to night as fast as a man can walk. They frequently go 60 miles in a day. These dogs are starved in the summer so that they can scarcely stagger around, but by the time winter sets in, they are put into the finest order. When worked, they are fed only at night. Not a morsel is given in the day. Fish is their common food. Thank you for listening to this episode of Discovering the Northwoods. To learn more, you can check out our show notes at mwhistory.org. There you will find a full transcript of the episode, photographs, and a map. Thank you so much for listening.